Hello, boys and girls and babes. Welcome back to the Janae Talks Caps podcast. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in today. And we would like to invite you, if you haven't already done so, to please go ahead and subscribe to our podcast if you are enjoying your time here. We have got a new episode for you every single week. We're going to continue doing episodes throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs, even though, unfortunately, obviously, our Washington Capitals will not be in the dance this season. But no matter, hockey is hockey, and we love hockey in general here at Janae Talks Caps. In addition to obviously loving the Washington Capitals specifically, but we are hockey fans too, not just Caps fans. And so, like I said, we will continue doing episodes throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs, keeping you all updated on all of the drama that's undoubtedly going to take place there, just as it always does. And then we will, of course, have some off-season Caps chatter as well. Lots of off-season Caps chatter, as a matter of fact. There's probably going to be a lot going on this off-season for the Capitals. It should be a very exciting summer if you're a Caps fan. There's going to be obviously a big draft lottery coming up first. Then there is going to be the draft itself. And of course, all of the usual NHL things that you get with the summer months, such as free agency, re-signing your own players, signing new players. There is probably going to be some trades, like I said, taking place for the Caps, whether that takes place at the draft or surrounding the draft, that remains to be seen, but there's almost certainly going to be some trades for the Caps this summer. They could also potentially, of course, be on the hunt for a new coach. We don't know that, we don't know that for sure yet, but it is a distinct possibility at this point. No word yet on whether or not the Caps will be extending Peter Laviolette's contract. Inside sources saying that, that's pretty much 50-50 right now. So it's still up in the air. And so, like I said, we will have coverage of all of that for you guys. And then, of course, we will roll right along into a fresh season of Caps hockey for 2023-2024. So stick with us, click on that subscribe button. We would love to have you along for the ride. And that's kind of what we want to talk about here today, is kind of just looking ahead, to next season and beyond for the Caps, the state of the team, now obviously and in the future, the state of the franchise as a whole, really. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to kind of compare it to the state of one of their biggest rivals. Who are we kidding? It is their biggest rival, and that being, of course, the Pittsburgh Penguins, who we now know for sure have also missed qualifying for the Stanley Cup playoffs this season, after what can only be described really as a super disappointing if you're a Penguins fan, but pretty much fucking phenomenal, beautiful, hysterically funny if you're a Caps fan, or a fan of pretty much any other team who just doesn't like the Penguins. But yeah, anyways, it was an ugly, ugly, ugly loss that they had to the lowly Chicago Blackhawks the other night on Pittsburgh's home ice as well, in front of their own Penguins fans. They just dropped an absolute stinker of a game to what was at the time, obviously, the 32nd place team in the NHL, and the Blackhawks. They're not the 32nd place team anymore, because they took the 2 standings points from the Penguins. But you get my point. The Blackhawks are a truly terrible team, historically bad. And yet in the Penguins' biggest game of the season, with their playoff lives on the line, the Pens came out and basically just dropped a big deuce right there at center ice. All over that Penguins logo. Seriously, shit smeared all over the ice. That was what this was equivalent to. That's how bad this game was for the Pens. And thanks to our Capitals of all teams, who beat the New York Islanders by a 5-2 score the night before, the Penguins actually had their playoff fate in their own hands heading into this game as well against the Blackhawks. But they apparently chose not to do anything with that. Like I said, a big deuce right there at center ice. So, with the Islanders beating the lowly Montreal Canadiens last night by a 4-2 score in regulation, because that's what you're supposed to do against a lowly opponent when your playoff lives are on the line, is to beat them. So the Isles do that, and they get the 2 points there, and with that, the Penguins are eliminated. And so I wanted to take a look, have a chat with you all today about like I said, the direction that these two teams, these two franchises, those being, of course, our own Washington Capitals and the rival Pittsburgh Penguins, just kind of the directions that they're heading in for next season and beyond, now that they have both missed the playoffs for the first time, by the way, since Alex Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby were rookies in the league. So that's a long time ago. So it should be rather fun to take a look at this if you're a Capitals fan, as the outlook for the Caps next season and beyond is certainly, a lot sunnier than that of their biggest rival. So to put it simply, the future's looking pretty bright for the Caps. It really is. While on the flip side of things, on the flip side of that coin, their biggest rival, the Penguins, is looking pretty damn bleak for them right now. So we'll talk about that. And to start off, these two teams, they certainly missed the playoffs in completely different ways, right? While the Caps racked up a historical amount of injuries to key players, the Pens, they were basically healthy all season long. They just weren't very good despite being healthy. So, that definitely plays into the outlook for each of these teams moving forward, is that while the Caps, honestly, they have a perfectly good, actually, excuse for not making the playoffs this season. Whether or not they want to use that excuse, I know, hockey players, probably athletes in general, they don't like to use those excuses. But honestly, if we look at it, with no, biased goggles on, if we just look at it objectively, they have a perfectly good excuse for not making the playoffs this season. They had so many injuries all season long to so many key players. So the Pens, however, they are not able to justify their miss in the same way because all of their key players were healthy, right? So that explains why when you listen to folks around the league right now, a lot of people are a lot more optimistic about the Caps returning to the postseason next season, whereas people are a lot more pessimistic about the Pens' chances of doing the same. And I think that those folks are probably right for what it's worth. Assuming that the Caps don't suffer a bunch of freak injuries again next season, I think that their stay outside of the postseason bracket is probably likely to be a short one, likely just the one season this season. Whereas I think for the Pens, it's more likely that this is just the beginning of a deeper downhill trend for reasons, like I said, that we're going to get into during this episode here today. We'll look at all of those reasons, for both teams, why it's more optimistic for the Caps and, like I said, more pessimistic on the Penguin side of things. But yeah, for the Caps, missing the playoffs this season is likely to be just an anomaly, a product of a lot of bad luck when it comes to injuries. Whereas for the Pens, as I said, I think it's probably just the beginning of a new norm for them, which frankly, suits me just fine, to be completely honest with you. I couldn't give two shits if the Pens are in the playoffs or not. I like being able to watch the playoffs and, not having to listen to 3 hours of the broadcasters just droning on about how, Sidney Crosby was sitting there on the bench and yet he's somehow responsible for that Penguins goal because he looked at the puck kind of funny and just sort of willed it into the net from his seat on the bench. That's the kind of crap that we have to listen to when the Penguins are in the playoffs. So good riddance. Find something else to talk about for the broadcasters. It'll be nice for us fans not having to listen to that. So anyway, when you look at these two franchises, the Capitals and the Penguins, the big difference between them right now and why, like I said, there's such a different feeling regarding each of their respective futures, it's largely because of the way that they have managed or not managed their assets recently. So first of all, for the Penguins, the trading away of all of their assets really started when Jim Rutherford was still their general manager, right? And you will recall that he traded away basically the entirety of the Penguins farm system just trying to acquire somebody who might be able to handle Tom Wilson in a playoff series. He failed to find that somebody, as frankly, there is no one who can handle Tom Wilson. But as I said, like Jim Rutherford, he traded away almost all of the Penguins draft picks trying to acquire somebody who didn't even exist, that being somebody who could handle Tom Wilson. So that's really when it all really started for the Pens. And we're seeing the consequences of that, of those decisions starting to add up now. They're starting to come to the surface here. So, of course, Tom Wilson, he knocked out cold most of Rutherford's acquired so-called tough guys. Jamie Alexiak comes to mind right away. That was a TKO. And so it was literally here's Tom Wilson. He would TKO, like I said, one of them. So Rutherford, he would ship that guy out right away. He would trade that guy away again, and then he would go out and try to acquire somebody else. Waste another first-round draft pick to make that happen, and then Wilson would promptly knock out that guy too. So, just wash, rinse, repeat until you have no first round draft picks left if you're the Penguins. So, and then the big oopsies for the Pens, of course, was when Tom Wilson and the Caps beat the Penguins in the playoffs anyway, and then went on to win the Stanley Cup as the Pens sat at home watching. So, it was really like a wild ride the last couple of years of Jim Rutherford's tenure in Pittsburgh. And now, of course, he's busy ensuring that my hometown Vancouver Canucks don't get anywhere near the playoffs as well. But yeah, the Penguins, they've traded away assets as if the future does not even exist. They're operating under the assumption that the Earth is going to get hit by a massive comet in the next 3 years. And so they won't have to pay for any of this mortgaging that they've been doing of their future here. So, but if we assume that the Earth doesn't get hit by a comet that kills us all within the next 3 years, then the Penguins are pretty much screwed when you look at it. They have no young talent, no good young NHL players on their roster, no prospects to write home about, and certainly no draft picks. Like I said, they traded them all away. So, no draft picks where they could have theoretically hoped to replenish that empty cupboard. So it's pretty bleak for them right now, folks. They've certainly screwed up this season as well. As, the very last thing that you want to do as an organization, is, to just barely miss the playoffs, right? Is that way, when that happens, not only do you not get a ticket to the dance, but you also don't get a high enough draft pick to really make an impact at all. So, this is literally, it's one of the absolute best, deepest drafts in the history of the NHL. If you listen to all of these scouts, they're all saying it. So for the Penguins, their approach at this season's trade deadline, I said it at the time too. It just made absolutely no sense to me. At best, they were going to be a bubble team. And so, I understand when people say, I get that whole thinking of, if you can get in, then you can win. I get that. Sure, that's fine. In theory, that's true. But this Penguins team, like I said, is not built to win. They are not good. They haven't been good all season. Anyone who's watched them this season will tell you that. And so how their general manager could watch that pitiful team out there on the ice all season long, and then look around at how historically strong the Eastern Conference has been all season long as well, right? You have to take that into account as well. So you take that all into account, and it's how does Ron Hextall look at that? How does he look at all of that and think, man, I should really spend some more assets here at this trade deadline to be a buyer, just so that we can, at best, get our asses handed to us in the first round. Seriously, tell me how that makes any sense at all. And his big buy, if you want to call it that, at the deadline, by the way, was yet another guy on the wrong side of 30, and also on the wrong side of a steep downhill decline in his career, that being Mikael Granlund, who also has a $5 million cap hit for the next 3 seasons. Just brutal, absolutely brutal by Ron Hextall. I have no idea what he's thinking there. Penguins fans, they were up in arms about that trade when it happened. They were up in arms about the whole trade deadline, and just, really the whole season, the way that everything's gone for them, the way that they're being managed here by Hextall. So, not only did they waste more assets being buyers at the deadline, But like I said, by barely missing the playoffs, they're also going to screw themselves out of getting a high draft pick, and they're going to miss out on the lottery for generational talent Connor Bedard, as well as missing out on a shot at any of the other uber talented players who are projected to go in the top 10 of this year's draft as well. Like, this is a really, really strong draft. Like I said, it's highly, like, it's being widely regarded as one of the best and deepest drafts ever of all time, NHL history. So, like, overall, really just a masterclass there by Ron Hextall. Like, they should teach this stuff in GM school, seriously. Just brutal. Meanwhile, on the Caps side of things, as we've mentioned, there's lots of reasons for Caps fans to be excited, both, like I said, for next season and for the seasons coming after that one. First of all, unlike the Pens, the Caps took a very smart approach at the trade deadline. We've talked about that on the show here before. They sold off all of their older pending unrestricted free agent players to the highest bidders, cashing in on those expiring contracts of those older players who, they weren't going to keep them anyway. So they stockpiled a bunch of draft picks, and they even managed to acquire a very talented young defenseman in Rasmus Sandin. So we've talked about him a lot on the show as well. He figures to be in their top 4 on defense for years to come. And so because of that smart trade deadline approach, they've created a ton of flexibility for themselves heading into the offseason, where they will have the draft assets to be able to trade for more talented young NHL players, should they choose to go that route. The other route, of course, is to simply keep the draft picks and make the picks yourselves. So, both of those are good options. And I do think that we will see a combination of the two routes being used. I think that the Caps are going to hang on to some of the draft picks, but I do think that they're going to use one or two of them at least to acquire more young NHL talent that, can jump into the Caps lineup for next season and help them win a lot of games, both right now and in the future. So that's what I would look for. They want young, skilled players. We know that. Brian McClellan has said that. He's openly, come out and admitted that he's looking for a scoring top 6 winger. That's one thing that we know is on his shopping list for this offseason. And, the Caps, with their clutch tanking right now at the end of the season, have also improved their draft lottery odds significantly. And they are now guaranteed a premium slot in this year's NHL draft as well. So, if you're not familiar with it, how it works is, you can only move up a maximum of 10 slots in the draft. So it's only the bottom 11 teams in the league that are actually in that lottery for the number 1 overall pick, which is obviously going to be Connor Bedard. So the Caps right now, at the time that I'm recording this episode, they are in the bottom 8 spot, which is actually the lowest that they could have finished, once they were officially eliminated from playoff contention. And obviously, that's when the tanking could officially begin. They've done well. Seriously, to slide all the way down to the bottom 8 spot, which obviously improves their odds of winning the number 1 overall pick. But also, bigger picture, even if they don't win the number 1 overall pick, by sliding as low as they have, they've also improved their odds of just getting a higher pick in general, right? Because obviously you always want to pick as high as possible. And like we mentioned earlier, that's especially true in this draft in particular, where the talent level is so high for those top 5, top 10 prospects. So the Caps, they're in a really good spot here. And as it stands right now, like I said, at the time that I'm recording this episode, as of right now, they do own a 6% chance of winning the draft lottery outright, winning that first overall pick and presumably winning, like I said, Connor Bedard. And now, I know what you're thinking, 6%, it doesn't sound like a lot, right? But it actually is in this scenario, because you don't have to go very far back, not at all, to find the last time that a team won the draft lottery outright with odds like that. As the New York Rangers, they won the draft lottery and the number 1 overall pick when they only had 2% odds of doing so. That was in the draft that got them Alexis Lafreniere. So obviously that wasn't that long ago. That was just the 2020 NHL draft. So it does happen. And it's not nearly as far-fetched as you might think. So it's, like people like to talk about tanking, like, should we do it? Should we not? Like, I say, like, once you're out of the playoffs, like there's only a couple weeks or whatever it was left in the season, that you're like, you've been mathematically eliminated. You're out of the playoffs for sure. So like, and they have all these injuries too, right? Like there's really no point other than pride, of course, which it does count for something. But there's really no point. Like you don't gain anything at that point by winning games. You can only gain something by dropping standings points, by dropping lower in the standings. So, I have to admit, I've kind of been, if not cheering for, I have kind of been like hoping for them a little bit to lose these last couple of weeks, just because, like, even if my heart, and I've said this a lot, my heart always wants our boys to win the games, always. Like, even if I say, logically that I want them to lose for the better draft lottery odds, like even if I say that out loud, I always, like, during the heat of the moment, during the game, I always find myself, cheering for Caps goals, cheering for them to win. That's my heart. Like in my heart, I always want them to win. But logically, thinking with my head, I've kind of been wanting them to lose these last couple of weeks, just because that's what makes sense. Like you can really, this draft matters a lot for a lot of teams, and you can really improve your chances of, it helping you a lot more now and in the future, just by losing these last couple of games that really don't mean anything, right? So, and now, like, another thing that's really setting the Caps apart from their rival Penguins right now, when you look ahead to the future, is the depth of the prospects and the young talent that the Caps already possess. Because, like, we're talking about the draft lottery, but we have to talk about, the players that they already have as well, right? And a really good indicator of, the talent that the Caps have in their system is obviously to look at the Capitals AHL affiliate, the Hershey Bears, who are the number one team in the AHL this season with 43 wins already through 70 games played. So they have been on fire all season long. They're a very, very, very good team. And when you look at the Bears roster, like, there's a lot of really talented young players who could very well be on the Caps roster as soon as next season. The Caps, they've drafted most of these guys themselves, and a few of them, they've plucked out of college hockey and other places as free agents as well. And there's a lot to like about a lot of these players. Like, when you look at the Bears roster right now, obviously guys like Connor McMichael, Hendrix Lapierre, Vinny Iorio, these are guys who have a very good shot at being on this team as soon as next season. In fact, like, all three of those guys have already made their NHL debuts with the Caps. Obviously, McMichael, he's played the most games with the big club so far. But, like, from what I've heard, from folks down in Hershey, who go to a lot of the Bears games, Connor McMichael has been on an absolute heater down in Hershey. Like, he's playing can't miss hockey right now and has been for weeks. So it definitely seems like he's using his time in the AHL in the right way, using it to develop his game, further his game, and just playing big minutes and getting a lot of confidence down there. So that's exactly what you want to see if you're the Caps. That's exactly what I was hoping would happen when they sent him back down. He's using it really to just, fuel his game, like better his game, develop himself more. And that's exactly what you want to see. So Hendrix Lapierre as well, like, he just had a hat trick the other night for Hershey too. So these are really, really talented prospects who are continuing, like I said, to just get better and better and better. And so that's obviously, it's really exciting if you're a Caps fan. Ethan Frank, he's obviously another guy who could very well factor into the Caps' plans for next season. They just signed him to an NHL deal for next season, which has, he's definitely earned that. He would have been highly coveted by a lot of teams around the league had the Caps let him get to free agency. So good on the Caps for making that deal happen. Frank, obviously, he was an AHL All-Star this season as a rookie. He's Hershey's leading scorer as a rookie as well, which is really impressive. Anytime that you're a rookie and you're still leading your team in scoring and leading the best team in the league in scoring at that, that's super, super impressive. And he was just named to the AHL All-Rookie team the other day as well. And obviously everyone knows, everyone's already heard, everyone around hockey has already heard about how he set a literal world record for fastest skater. That happened, of course, during the AHL's All-Star weekend. So not only did he win the fastest skater competition at the AHL's All-Star weekend, but he did it with an insane time that was faster than any time we've ever seen in either the AHL or the NHL. So he's literally the fastest player on the planet. He's going to be a very fun player to watch moving forward for sure. The guy can flat out fly, and he can flat out score goals too. So that's obviously a very good combination if you're a hockey player. So those are kind of the guys down in Hershey who are probably most likely, I would say, to make the jump to the NHL sooner rather than later. Those are kind of the guys who are probably first in line given the seasons that they've had this season, and just their general, NHL readiness as well. But honestly, the two most talented prospects for the Caps might be two of their youngest prospects, guys that they just drafted last year, those being obviously a couple of Russian forwards in Ivan Miroshnichenko and Alexander Suzdalev. I'm sure you have heard of these guys by now if you're a Capitals fan. Now, Miroshnichenko, he's been well covered by pretty much all of the media already. He was probably the most talented player in last year's draft. But teams, unfortunately, they got a little bit scared off because he had a recent cancer diagnosis, which is obviously always very scary, for anyone in any situation. So hockey aside. But guess what? He got cancer treatment. He finished cancer treatment. He's healthy now, and he's already back tearing it up on the ice once again, and it's already looking like an absolute steal of a pick for the Caps in that draft. And listen, obviously it goes without saying, but the most important thing, the thing that matters the most is that this young man is healthy once again. That is fucking amazing, and I am so glad for him and for his family that he is. That's the best news ever. Hands down. So, I just want to send a little bit of a shout out, if you will, just well wishes. Just, I don't know if congratulations is the right thing to say, but that's a huge, huge thing. He literally beat cancer. So that's amazing. Like I said, hockey aside, for anyone to beat cancer in any situation, it's fucking incredible. It's something, as you guys know, you can maybe tell I'm getting a little bit choked up right now. It's something that is very close to my heart. So amazing for Ivan Miroshnichenko. And like I said, I'm not sure if congratulations is the right word, but he kicked its ass. He kicked cancer's ass, which is what we hope for everyone in that situation. So, but secondly, for the Washington Capitals, they probably got, like I said, the best player in last year's draft. Because, they did their research, they talked to his doctors, they did their homework, and they were comfortable making that selection in the first round, using a first round pick on this kid, regardless of what his situation was at the time, health-wise. So, and seriously, TSN up here in Canada, Sportsnet, all of these outlets up here, they all said that, had this kid been healthy at the time leading up to the draft, it's likely that he literally could have been the number one overall pick. He is that good. So what can we say? A hell of a job done by the Caps scouting department, and everyone else involved in all of that for sure. Great work by the Caps, and great work, like I said, by Ivan Miroshnichenko to beat cancer. Just amazing. What a triumph for him. So like I said, so happy for him and for his family. His health is obviously the most important thing. And then, let's see, Alexander Suzdalev, right? So Suzdalev, we're calling him Suzy, by the way. that's catching on. So Susie, like if you have not seen this kid play yet, you have got to watch. The Regina Pats unfortunately are out of the playoffs now, but that was his WHL team. He was Connor Bedard's line mate this season with the Regina Pats of the WHL. And you know what? Like for all of the very well-deserved hoopla about Connor Bedard, there were several times this season where I would watch a Regina Pats game and Alexander Suzdalev would be by far the most noticeable player on the ice in a good way. And again, like that's an ice surface that included Connor Bedard. So that's really saying something. But yeah, like Suzdalev, like I said, if you haven't seen this kid play yet, you've got to see him play. The Pats, obviously, like I said, out of the playoffs now. So you might have to wait until next season. But like, you've got to see this kid seriously. Like Suzdalev, I know everyone's saying like, oh, he was line mates with Connor Bedard. He's a hell of a player in his own right. Like, watch the games, like, man, like, is he ever talented? Like, he can do whatever the fuck he wants with the puck out there. He's got it on a string, literally. So he's going to be a very, very exciting player for the Caps someday, probably sooner rather than later with that talent level. So I don't think that we will see either of Miroshnichenko or Suzdalev next season for the Caps, at least not during the regular season, as Miroshnichenko's unfortunately still got one more season left on his KHL contract. And Suzdalev, like I said, he was in the WHL this season. He hasn't turned pro yet. They're very young. Like I said, the Caps just got these guys in the most recent draft here, 2022. But we could potentially see a scenario where, like Miroshnichenko, for example, maybe he joins the Caps late in the season next season after his KHL season ends. We do see that sometimes with Russian players who are, clearly ready to be playing in the NHL. They come over from Russia once the KHL season ends and they jump just right into the NHL. We saw that with Evgeny Kuznetsov, actually, if you remember. Like, he joined the Caps late in the season one year to make his NHL debut after his KHL season had ended. So that's a scenario that I could see playing out at the near the end of next season. But yeah, those are kind of the upper echelon prospects for the Caps. But they've got a lot of other good players in Hershey and elsewhere who could also factor in at some point as well. As they continue to develop. So I know that the Caps, for example, they really like forward I'm going to try to say this right, Ludwig Person. It's a hard name to say. Another very recent draft pick, just picked last year as well. So he's still only 19 years old as well. But they do really like him. And they just signed 20-year-old center Ryan Hoffer to a 3-year entry-level contract as well. That kid is drawing some comparisons to the great Patrice Bergeron early on in his career. So that's definitely an exciting thought for sure if you're a Capitals fan. I don't think there's anyone who wouldn't want a Patrice Bergeron on their team. So, and wingers like Henry Rybinski and Bogdan Triniev. I know that the Caps like those two players a lot as well. They're different players, they're both, they're still both only 21 years old. But Bogdan Triniev, like if you haven't seen him play before, he is an absolute beast. Absolute beast. And even a guy on the back end as well, like Lucas Johansson, former first round pick, and he's also the younger brother of Nashville Predators forward Ryan Johansson. But he's a defenseman who, he's battled through some injuries, quite a few injuries already in his young career, but like he's starting to get back on the right track now, making a lot of really good strides, and he did get a few games up with the Caps this season as well. So he's definitely going to be, kind of behind a little bit on the depth chart, behind guys like Alexander Alexeyev, Vinny Iorio. Obviously Alexeyev and Iorio, two really, really good players. They're just kind of ahead of where Lucas Johansson is at right now. But yeah, Johansson, like he's a good solid option as well. If, God forbid we have more injuries again next season. And by the way, like all of a sudden there's a lot of really good young players on the Caps roster already as well. They've done a great job over the past year or so bringing in these guys. There was a lot of talk coming into this season, certainly over, last off season, the past off season, about how, the Caps are getting older. They're one of the oldest teams in the league, blah, 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 blah. So they've done a great job, like I said, over the past year or so, bringing in these guys, younger guys, and then locking them up to contract extensions. Obviously a guy like Dylan Strome comes to mind right away. He's been an absolutely perfect fit, just beautiful. He signed a 5-year contract extension with the Caps, and a guy like Sonny Milano as well. He signed a 3-year contract extension with the Caps. They acquired, of course, Rasmus Sandin at the trade deadline. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. Martin Feravari and Alexander Alexeyev, they're obviously going to be huge parts of this blue line going forward as well. Feravari, he's already been a top pairing guy for these last 2 seasons pretty much now. And he's still just 23 years old. Such a good player. His game's only getting better and better and better. And Alexeyev, man, what an absolute beast. Absolute beast out there. How good has he looked out there? Seriously. He looks like he's played 10 years in the league already. Obviously he's a monstrous presence out there. I think he's, what is he, 6'4", and I think he's 230 pounds already. So he's a huge presence out there on the ice. But he just plays such a calm, smart game as well. For how young he is, he really does not make mistakes. Like I said, he looks like he's played 10 years already in the league. So no panic in his game at all. So with him, with Alexeyev, and with, like I said, Feravari and now Sandin as well, all of those guys down the left side of our blue line, and they're all 23 years old or younger. Man, our left side of our defense is going to be set for a very, very long time and set up to be just an absolute nightmare to play against as well, which is obviously, you love to see it. And up front there are guys who are getting a look right now, who figure to be in the lineup more regularly next season. And they certainly deserve to have that chance to be in the lineup more regularly with how well they've played. A guy like Alexei Protas, I definitely want to see him getting some real ice time next season. He really deserves it. What a player. He plays so far. It's another guy who he plays so far ahead of his age. Just like I said, just like what we're seeing with Alexeyev right now, getting more and more and more comfortable. Protas, he's been there for a while. He's been playing, he's looked like he's felt comfortable for quite a while now. So he deserves a real shot. So I'd like to see, like I said, some roster spots, obviously, which they should be. They should be being opened up for some of these younger players. But yeah, Alexei Protas, what a player. He plays, like I said, so far ahead of his age. He's so responsible with the puck and so responsible defensively out there as well. The kid just never makes a mistake. And he's, as well, he's a total beast as well. What did they say at the start of this season? I think they said he put on 40 pounds of muscle or something during this last off season. And I mean, he's 9 feet tall too. He's just an absolute behemoth. And he's got offensive skills too. I'm telling you, he could be another Tage Thompson in the making. You heard it here first. Write that down. No one thought that, I might sound crazy right now saying that, but no one thought that Tage Thompson was going to turn out to be Tage Thompson either. That's why he was actually traded, if you remember. He used to be property of the St. Louis Blues. I bet you they're regretting that decision now. And as, like I said, as these younger players start to play more and more games in the league, they start to play more and more minutes in the league, they start to get more and more comfortable. And that's when you really start to see kind of more of the offensive side of their game come out, because they feel more comfortable to try more things out there on the ice. They're not afraid of making a mistake. They get more comfortable with the puck. They'll try more, creative plays that they probably tried more in junior, right? So that's what happened with Tage Thompson. That's exactly kind of the trajectory that we saw with him. And I do think that we could see something very similar happening with Alexei Protas. He has the whole package. He's got all of those tools, all of those skills, the same, kind of skill set that Tage Thompson has. Obviously the size, like I said, offensive skills as well. So, but yeah, Protas, Joe Snively is another guy who should figure into the plans for next season for sure. He's probably your in-house Connor Sheary replacement. He basically is Connor Sheary, except 5 years younger and with more offensive upside. And Beck Malenstein, like, he is a guy who I absolutely want to see regularly for this team next season. Like, I think he's an absolute perfect fit for our fourth line. He's basically a bigger version of Garnet Hathaway. Like, he plays a very similar game to what Hathaway does. He's filled in seamlessly on that fourth line whenever they've put him there. He's had instant chemistry with Nick Dowd, which is very important. Nick Dowd, obviously, he's got a contract here. He's staying here. He's your fourth line center. He's the best fourth line center in the league. So you want him to have line mates who he has chemistry with. And he and Beck Malenstein, they've had instant chemistry. So, he's got, he being Beck Malenstein, he's got some offensive touch as well, but he's really responsible defensively, which is always important. Obviously for a fourth line forward, they match up oftentimes against the opponent's top offensive players. So you want those guys on your fourth line to be really responsible defensively, which Beck Malenstein is. And he just plays very hard. Like, guys hate playing against him. You can definitely see why they were calling him Hershey's Tom Wilson. Like, he loves throwing his body around, and he is very good at it, just like Tom Wilson is. He's just, he's a nightmare to play against, which is exactly, like I said, what you want for your fourth line. So I definitely want to see him getting a Caps jersey regularly next season. He's definitely shown that he's more than ready for it. And so there you have it, folks. Checking the clock here. I've already been talking for 40 minutes. So, I just wanted to have this discussion though, because I know, like, when you miss the playoffs, it's tough. We haven't had a lot of experience with this feeling here recently as Capitals fans. The Capitals, obviously, like, they've been in the playoffs every single year for what feels like forever now. So, it's not a feeling that we've experienced a lot. It's going to take a little bit of getting used to, but like I said, hopefully we won't have to get used to it for very long. I do think that the Caps will be back a lot stronger again next season. I think they're going to have, they're going to be much better next season, provided obviously that we don't have all of the injuries that we did this season. But so there you have it, folks. Like I said, we have given a lot of reasons as to why, the Caps are just a lot better set up for the future than their rival Pittsburgh Penguins are. Those two teams, those two franchises always being compared. So we thought that we would do our own comparison here today. And like I said, it's a tough feeling missing the playoffs, but that's why we wanted to have this chat here today. Just give you guys, something to think about, just, some things to feel optimistic about, right? Because it is going to be a long off season. So we want to just kind of bring a little bit of positivity into the room, if you will. And so I do hope that will give you guys, my fellow Caps fans, like I said, plenty of optimism, plenty of reason to be excited heading into next season and beyond. It's going to be, like I said, I can feel it in my gut, in my bones. It's going to be a short hiatus from the playoffs. That's my feeling. That's my prediction, and I'm sticking to it. You guys can hold me to it as well. Like, come back at me at the end of next season if it turns out not to be true. But like I said, that's just my gut feeling. In my gut, I feel it. They'll be back next season. But for now, I wanted to thank you all again so much for listening. Please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already. I know that you guys are doing that because I see the numbers and they're going up and up and up all the time. So thank you guys so much. It's amazing the support that the show is getting. And like I said, we're going to have tons of Stanley Cup playoff content. Tons and tons of off-season content for our Washington Capitals. The draft lottery, like I said, that's up first. The draft itself as well. Any trades, free agency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of things always going on around the NHL in the summer. So we're going to have it all for you guys right here at Janaea Talks Caps. So click on that subscribe button. We love having you all here. Thank you again so much from the bottom of my heart. It's been a hell of a season, a hell of a ride. And until next time, babes, as always, even when we miss the playoffs, let's go Caps.